How's it going? This is Keith Morgan for TechTyro.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at After Effects CS6. Now, we're just taking our first look at After Effects, so we're just going to be taking a look at the interface and getting you comfortable where everything is. So, you can download After Effects from the Adobe website, or by following the Software Links tab on our website, where you can either download a trial version of the software, which works for 30 days, full functionality, or you can buy the software for whatever price it is on for at the time of your purchasing. We also recommend that you download our free After Effects shortcut cards from our downloads page to help you keep track of the features that you will be learning. And with that, let's jump right in. When you first open After Effects, you'll be greeted with the Tips of the Day window, which will always open whenever you first install After Effects. And if you really just want to get right into it, just click through some of these. They have a lot of handy little tips, and they get you started. And you don't really think that all this stuff is really relevant, but then you realize how much you actually use. So, very handy. But if you don't want it to open every time you open After Effects, just uncheck that box and hit close, and it will never pop up again unless you go Help, Tips of the Day, and there you are. So here we are in After Effects, and as you can see, we have many panels, and it can be quite overwhelming at first. So let's just take it slow. We will first go up and we'll look at our project panel. So our project panel currently has nothing in it, but as you add things to your project, they'll all be listed as individual entries. Any files you import, any compositions you have, any layers, etc., can all be found in the project panel. Now, another important one that we'll add, which isn't by default on your interface, is the Effects Controls panel, which you use to add filters to your layers. So to get access to that, which will end up in the project panel over here, we go Window, down to Effects Controls, and we just click it, and we get Effects Controls. Now, we won't be able to use that right this second, but in the future we will, so we will leave it as such. And now, before you can do anything in After Effects, you have to create a composition. So we'll go Composition, New Composition, and After Effects comes preloaded with a bunch of presets. A lot of them are irrelevant these days, being standard definition, but if you're just getting started and you just want to screw around, they're really nice to just pick something that your computer can handle and it won't chug forever rendering anything. So you can always pick one of those. We're just going to stick with the NTSC DV widescreen preset, and we'll hit OK with the defaults. And you'll see in our project panel we get a composition 1 added. If we named our composition, it'd be named something else. For example, we can go to Composition, and then Composition Settings, and we can rename our composition to, let's say, Interface Tour. And if we hit OK, it'll update in our project panel, and also down here in our timeline. So a composition by itself really isn't anything. If we look here, and I'll just toggle this alpha button, you'll see there's nothing in our composition. Compositions are much like entire documents within documents. So what they do is they hold layers, and then you edit the layers, and then you can work with whole compositions at once as a flattened image, or you can work with the individual layers within each comp. It gets really versatile and confusing at times, but we'll work through that. So we can either right-click on our timeline down here in this empty spot, and we can go New Layer and choose one of these layers. But for now, we're going to go the proper way, which you can find by going to Layer, New, Solid, and we'll just choose a color that is easily, you can see other things on it easily, so we'll say blue, and we'll hit OK. And as you can see by this bounding box, the layer is now the exact same size as our comp. It doesn't always default to that, you got to make sure, but generally it usually comes in at the same size as your comp. So that is the very basic adding a solid feature into After Effects. So I hope I haven't lost you yet, but what we can do now is we can make use of our Effects Controls panel. So you can either right-click, just like down here to add a layer, you can either right-click down there and you get your dialog box with task-specific options, or so there's all your library of effects, or you can go Effect, and let's just choose one like Color Correction and Hue Saturation. And nothing's happened yet, but that's just because we haven't changed any of the settings over here. So what we can do is we can change the master hue. So if you're ever wondering what color will end up when you change your hue, you can always just say, oh, well, this is blue, so this is blue here. So if we were to offset the color wheel by so much, you can see we've offset it to the magentas and the pinks now. So that's essentially how the hue saturation works. We can also dumb down our saturation, play with our lightness. We won't worry about this filter right now since it's not our main focus right now. We're just trying to get you comfortable with After Effects. So I'll just hit delete and get rid of that filter. And now next, we're going to show you a couple of the tools. Up here at the top, we have our selection tool, and that is just your general all-around tool you'll be using a lot of. And what you can do is you can click and drag on a layer and move it, and that changes its position value. You have your hand tool, and what that does is that lets you pan your entire view in relation to your composition viewer window. So you can see we just move it around, and that's handy if you have really big layers that extend past your composition view and you want to see them, or you're zoomed in really far and you're just trying to look at little details, especially if you're in there rotoscoping or anything. Next we have our zoom tool, and that's pretty self-explanatory. You just draw a box, it'll automatically go to that zoom level. We have our rotate tool, and I'm pretty sure that speaks for itself as well. You just use it on a layer, rotates. We have our camera tool. We won't get into that on this tutorial right now. Likewise, we will not get into the pan behind tool. They do have specific functions, but we won't get into them today. Then we have our rectangular marquee tool, or I suppose our rectangle tool. And I'll save that one and the pen tool for our tutorial on shapes and masks, but we'll get onto the text tool now. So if we click with the text tool, we can just start typing, like, tutorial 01, and then we can use it. So if you notice, if we move our selection cursor over the edge of the bounding box, we can actually transform it just by clicking and dragging. And if you hold shift, you get proportional scaling. Otherwise, it just goes whichever way it decides. So if we select our text tool and we select all of our words, we can go over here to the character panel, and you might need to drag this out to see it. And if it's not there, you can find it under window and then character, and it'll just pop up somewhere over here. But what you can do is you can change the font. Let's say we'll choose Popular STD just for fun. And you can change all these different text tools. You can change all these different text options rather, and just go nuts with it. And then you should also have a paragraph panel. Likewise, if you don't have that, you can find it under the window paragraph, and you can change your alignment. You can change all this other stuff. Apparently not. Yeah, so that's how you edit text, very basically, in After Effects. Just a few more things for this tutorial. I'll show you how to add effects to layers that aren't really layers. They're like demi-layers. And they're called adjustment layers, so if we just add one down here, what an adjustment layer does is that it is strictly there to hold filters and effects for the layers below them. So say we have this lovely composition here, and we worked really hard on it, and you're slaving all night, and you want to tweak it globally. So what you can do is you can go, add, let's say we want to add a distort. So let's go and add a turbulent displacement. And what that does is that adds it to everything below the adjustment layer. But if we were going to go and move it, if we move the adjustment layer below the text layer, you would see it only affects the royal blue layer now. So, yeah. Now many of you will want to get into animating, the first thing you get into After Effects. So I'll show you a very quick method on how to animate. And it's pretty simple and universal amongst most of the parameters in After Effects. So if you notice next to the names of all of these different parameters, there's a stopwatch. Now, if you click the stopwatch, that enables keyframe animation. So let's say we want to change the amount of displacement. Then we click the stopwatch, and if we hit U on our keyboard, it shows us which parameters have keyframes. And if we just zoom forward in time, we can go and change the value to something just ridiculous. And then it automatically adds a keyframe at that time. And if we just scrub through animation, we see that it automatically interpolates the data in between, and thus you have animation. So that is very handy, and likewise, you just can do it with almost any parameter in After Effects that has a stopwatch. And if you're also looking for more transform options, if you just twirl down the name for the layer, you will see a subheading for transform. If you bring that down, you can see all the different transform options you have. So you can play around with the anchor point, the position, the scale, rotation, and opacity. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are looking for the opacity. There it is. And for those of you that don't know what opacity is basically how see-through or not see-through an object is. If it's 100% opaque, it is solid. So if we were going to drop the opacity of our tutorial layer, you'll see that it becomes less opaque, more transparent, and we lose sight of it. And one final thing to show you is how to play back your animation. Now, I'm sure a lot of you just don't like to scrub through your animation like that. It can be quite daunting and tedious and stuff like that. So what After Effects does is it caches your animation in your RAM. This is what that green bar is there. Each green tick is a cached frame. Right here, it's the same animation afterwards, so it just caches the one frame, and then it knows the rest is going to be exactly the same. But right here where I've been scrubbing through it, it's just got little bits where it's been able to pick out a frame. So if you want it all to be rendered, you just hit 0 on your number pad, or if you don't have a number pad on a laptop, you can hit this button right here under RAM Preview. And then if you see, it just fills this green bar. And it doesn't necessarily cache it in real time, but when it starts playing back, it's almost always playing back in real time. So you'll see now that the screen is, or that this bar is full, it's playing it back, and this is real time. So that is a very handy way to preview your animations. And if you're having a very big project and it takes seconds and seconds for it to preview a single frame, it can be really handy just to like shove it in the RAM and then preview it all at once. It's very handy. You'll be doing it lots. I know I do it all the time. And yeah, so that wraps up our very basic introduction to After Effects. We hope you learned a lot. And for Tech Tyro, this is Keith Morgan signing off.